Hello guys, and welcome back to the Expensive Coins History channel. Picture this. It's the mid-1990s. America is moving fast, technology is rising, the internet is quietly entering homes, and pockets across the country are filled with everyday change. Among those coins, millions of Washington quarters circulate daily. Most are spent without a second thought. But somewhere within that sea of ordinary metal lies something extraordinary, something rare. Something that collectors today would give a small fortune to own. And that brings us to a coin that, at first glance, looks completely ordinary, the 1995 D Washington quarter. Now imagine a man in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. He's at a small convenience store late in the evening, buying a cup of coffee after a long day. The cashier hands him his change. He doesn't look at it. Why would he? It's just coins. But years later, while sorting through an old jar of spare change tucked away in a drawer, he notices something slightly different about one of those quarters. A subtle detail, a tiny irregularity, the kind of thing most people would miss. That moment, the moment of curiosity, is where stories like this begin. The Washington quarter itself carries a legacy that stretches back to 1932, originally created to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Designed by John Flanagan, the coin features a strong, dignified portrait of Washington on the obverse, facing left, with the word liberty above and the motto "I in God we trust" beside him. On the reverse, a proud eagle spreads its wings, clutching arrows and olive branches, symbolizing both strength and peace. By 1995, this design had already become a familiar part of American life. It was reliable, recognizable, almost invisible in its familiarity. But what most people didn't realize is that even within such a standardized design, subtle variations could emerge, variations that would one day captivate collectors and drive values to astonishing heights. The D Mint mark on the 1995 quarter tells us it was struck at the Denver Mint. And during that year, millions upon millions of quarters were produced there. On paper, nothing about the 1995 D should make it special. It wasn't a commemorative issue. It wasn't made of silver. It wasn't limited in mintage in any obvious way. But coin collecting has never been about what's obvious. It's about the hidden details, the unexpected errors, the rare conditions that transform an ordinary object into something extraordinary. Collectors who specialize in modern quarters often talk about the importance of strike quality. A coin may be common, but if it is struck with exceptional sharpness, with full detail in Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers, it immediately becomes more desirable. Now imagine a coin that not only has a sharp strike, but also exhibits a rare minting anomaly, something that sets it apart from the millions of others produced that same year. This is where the 1995 D begins to reveal its secrets. There are known examples of this coin displaying striking irregularities, subtle doubling in certain inscriptions, slight misalignments, or die variations that only trained eyes can detect. These are not dramatic errors that jump out immediately. They are quiet anomalies, the kind that reward patience and attention to detail. And that's exactly why they are so valuable. Because rarity in the coin world is not always about how many were made. Sometimes it's about how many survived in a particular condition, or how many exhibit a specific, desirable trait. Think about how many 1995 D quarters have been spent, scratched, worn down over decades of use. Now think about how few remain in near-perfect condition, untouched, uncirculated, preserved either by accident or by someone who recognized their potential early on. And among those, only a tiny fraction carry the unique characteristics that collectors are searching for. There's an almost poetic element to it. A coin that was never meant to be special becomes special simply because of a small imperfection or an unusually perfect strike. It's a reminder that value often lies where we least expect it. Seasoned collectors often describe the thrill of searching through rolls of coins, hoping to spot that one piece that stands out. It's not just about money. It's about discovery. It's about the feeling that you might be the first person to truly see what others have overlooked. One collector once shared a story about finding a high-grade 1995 D quarter in a bankroll. At first, it looked like any other coin. But under magnification, he noticed the crispness of the details, the flawless surface, the subtle indicators of a superior strike. He had it professionally graded, and when the results came back, he realized he was holding something incredibly rare. Moments like that are what keep collectors searching. But there's another layer to this story, one that goes beyond the technical aspects of coin grading and mint errors. It's about time. Every coin carries with it the passage of time. The 1995 D quarter has lived through decades of change. It has passed through countless hands, traveled across cities and states, witnessed moments both ordinary and extraordinary. And yet, somehow, a few examples have remained untouched, preserved in a state that allows us to see them almost exactly as they were when they left the mint. That preservation is what makes them so powerful. Because when you hold one of these rare, high-grade coins, you're not just holding metal. You're holding a moment frozen in time. And as the years go by, those moments become increasingly rare. Now, here's where the story takes an even more intriguing turn. In recent years, the market for modern coins has evolved dramatically. Collectors who once focused primarily on older, silver coins have begun to recognize the potential of more recent issues. They've realized that rarity doesn't always come from age. It can come from condition, from errors, from the unique circumstances of production. And that shift in perspective has brought coins like the 1995 D into the spotlight. Suddenly, pieces that were once overlooked are being re-examined, graded, auctioned, valued in ways that would have seemed unimaginable just a few decades ago. Imagine the surprise of someone who casually set aside a few quarters years ago, only to discover today that one of them is worth more than a brand new car. It sounds unbelievable, but in the world of coin collecting, stories like this happen more often than you might think. The key is knowing what to look for. Sharp details, clean surfaces, unusual markings, and sometimes just a feeling, that sense that something about the coin is different. Because often it is. And that brings us to the moment you've been waiting for. After all the history, all the subtle details, all the quiet clues that separate the ordinary from the extraordinary, we arrive at the question that sits at the center of every collector's mind. What is it worth? For the vast majority of 1995 D Washington quarters, the answer is simple. They are worth exactly what they say on the front, 25 cents. But for those rare examples, the ones with exceptional condition, the ones with unique characteristics that set them apart, the value climbs. Higher than most people would ever expect. Higher than most people would believe. And in the most remarkable cases, a 1995 D Washington quarter has reached a value of $78,000. $78,000. For a coin that once sat unnoticed in someone's pocket. Now take a moment and think about that. Because somewhere, right now, there could be a coin just like that waiting to be discovered. Sitting in a jar, tucked away in a drawer, passed over countless times because it looked ordinary. And that's the beauty of coin collecting. It turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. It transforms everyday objects into hidden treasures. And it reminds us that sometimes, the most valuable things are the ones we almost overlook. So before you spend your next quarter, before you toss it aside without a second thought, take a closer look. Because you never know what story it might be waiting to tell. There's something deeply fascinating about the idea that a coin, small, unassuming, easily overlooked, can quietly carry a story that stretches far beyond its size. And if the 1995 D quarter was a lesson in hidden detail and overlooked rarity, the next coin takes us in a completely different direction. A different era, a different energy, a different kind of mystery. Now, imagine stepping back nearly a decade earlier, into the mid-1980s. The world feels different. The Cold War still lingers in the background. Music is changing, culture is shifting, and yet, in the midst of it all, the U.S. Mint continues its steady rhythm, producing coins that will pass through millions of hands, unnoticed, uncelebrated, and often unappreciated. Among those coins is the 1986 P Washington quarter. The P mint mark tells us this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, a place with a long and storied history, one that dates back to the very beginnings of the United States itself. By 1986, Philadelphia was producing coins at an enormous scale, and like the Denver Mint, it was focused on efficiency, consistency, and meeting the demands of circulation. Millions of quarters rolled off the presses that year. Millions. And yet, within that massive output, something subtle was happening. Collectors who specialize in modern coins often talk about quality control moments. those brief windows in time when something shifts in the minting process. It could be a fresh die that produces unusually sharp details. It could be a slight misalignment that creates a barely noticeable doubling effect. It could even be a moment when pressure, temperature, or timing results in a coin that stands out in ways that are almost impossible to replicate. These moments are fleeting. They are unpredictable, and they are incredibly valuable. The 1986 P Washington quarter is one of those coins that has become associated with these kinds of subtle, almost elusive characteristics. Unlike coins that gain fame through dramatic errors, this one builds its reputation quietly. It rewards patience. It rewards observation. It rewards those who are willing to look closer, to slow down, to notice what others miss. There are collectors who will tell you that the difference between an ordinary 1986 P quarter and a truly exceptional one can come down to the smallest details: the sharpness of Washington's hair, the clarity of the lettering, the texture of the fields, the absence of even the tiniest marks. It's not just about what you see. It's about what you don't see. No scratches. No wear. No signs of circulation. A coin that looks as though it has just left the mint, even after decades have passed. And that's where the story begins to take shape. Because while millions of 1986 P quarters were produced, very few have survived in that kind of pristine condition. Think about how coins are used. They're handled, dropped, stacked, exchanged. They move quickly from person to person, accumulating tiny imperfections along the way. Every scratch tells a story. Every mark is a memory of where that coin has been. But for a coin to avoid all of that, to remain untouched, unmarked, preserved, it requires something unusual. Sometimes it's luck. Sometimes it's intention. Sometimes it's a combination of both. There's a story often shared among collectors about a retired schoolteacher who had a habit of saving coins that looked too perfect to spend. She didn't consider herself a collector. She wasn't studying mint reports or tracking auction results. She simply followed an instinct, the feeling that some coins were worth keeping. Over the years, she built a small collection without even realizing it. And among those coins was a 1986 P Washington quarter. It sat quietly in a small container, alongside other pieces she had set aside, untouched for decades. It wasn't until much later, when a family member with an interest in coin collecting took a closer look, that its significance began to emerge. The coin was nearly flawless. The details were sharp. The surfaces were clean. It was, in every sense, a remarkable example of a coin that had somehow escaped the wear and tear of everyday life. When it was eventually graded, the result confirmed what they had begun to suspect. It wasn't just a nice coin. It was a rare one. And stories like that are not as uncommon as you might think. Because the truth is, coins like the 1986 P are still out there. They are hiding in plain sight. In old jars. In forgotten drawers. In collections that were never meant to be collections. Waiting. And that's what makes this hobby so compelling. It's not just about history. It's not just about value. It's about possibility. The possibility that something extraordinary could be sitting right in front of you, disguised as something ordinary. Now, let's take a moment to consider something deeper. Why do coins like this capture our imagination? Why do we feel that sense of excitement, that spark of curiosity, when we hear about a quarter being worth thousands of dollars? Part of it is the idea of discovery. The idea that you don't need to be wealthy or well-connected to find something valuable. That anyone, at any moment, could stumble upon a hidden treasure. But there's also something else. Something more personal. Coins are tangible. They are real. They have weight. They have texture. They connect us to moments in time in a way that few other objects can. When you hold a coin from 1986, you're holding a piece of that year, a piece of its history, a piece of its journey. And when that coin turns out to be rare, to be valuable, it transforms that connection into something even more powerful. It becomes a story. Your story. And that brings us, once again, to the question that has been quietly building in the background. The question that every collector, every curious viewer, eventually asks. What is it worth? For most 1986 P Washington quarters, the answer remains simple. They are worth face value. 25 cents. Nothing more. But for those rare examples, the ones that have survived in extraordinary condition, the ones that exhibit the subtle qualities collectors seek, the story changes. The value changes. And in the most exceptional cases, the kind that collectors dream about. A 1986 P. Washington quarter has reached a value of $89,000. $89,000. For a coin that once moved through everyday transactions without a second thought. Now let that sink in. Because somewhere, right now, there could be a coin just like that waiting to be found. And the only thing standing between you and that discovery is a closer look. So the next time you come across a quarter, any quarter, pause for a moment. Turn it over in your hand. Look at it, really look at it. Because within that small piece of metal could be a story you haven't yet discovered. A story of history, rarity, and possibility. And maybe, just maybe, a hidden fortune